We are so glad you are here today. Let's start things off by introducing Katie Tamony. Katie is Monrovia's Chief Marketing Officer. She is also our top trend spotter, bringing us insights into the wonderful ways we can enjoy our outdoor spaces. Katie has more than 25 years of experience in lifestyle and leisure industries, and she is the former editor of Sunset Magazine and a longtime avid gardener with specific interests in the connections between garden, art, health, and well-being. Hi, Katie.
Hello, great to be back.
Yeah. Next, I'd like you to meet Megan McConnell. Megan is Monrovia's Plant Information Director. In addition to managing Monrovia's plant database of nearly 4,000 different varieties, Megan is responsible for all the plant information that appears on monrovia.com and on the tags you see on the plants at your local garden center. Megan is our go-to expert for choosing the right plant for the right application. Hi, Megan.
Hello.
With that, I will hand it off to Katie to kick things off.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Let's dig in, pun intended. It's going to be an exciting spring. So to start off with, as Kathleen mentioned, we want to get your opinion, get a sense from you of what you're interested in as we move through this webinar and into the season. So what's your garden vibe? What would you say represents your style most closely? Is it really going after bold blooms and having layers of color in the garden? Or maybe you want to, really go a little bit on the wilder side, creating what we call a modern meadow look and really are attracting pollinators and letting things just look a little more natural in your garden. Or maybe you just want layers of green foliage we call green drenching. You just want to surround yourself in tranquility and the calm that all these layers of green can provide. So which one are you, A, B, or C? And the voting has started. I see everybody's participating. This is great. We have a lot of interest in bold blooms and layers of color, which is wonderful. That's definitely a key trend that we've been seeing for a while. Okay, we have almost everybody participating. And it's pretty clear that color, we're all craving it after winter, spring is finally out. We've got 57% of you saying you want bold blooms and layers of color, about 32% preferring the wilder side, this idea of a modern meadow, and 10% going for just just want to breathe and feel relaxed in layers of green. Okay, so share the results here. Yeah, looks like bold blooms takes it. Okay, so oops, got to get rid of my polling here, get back to the presentation. All right, well, let's dig in to bold blooms and layers of color and modern meadow and green drenching and what they all mean and what the plants are that can help you achieve these looks. So to start with, I wanted to talk about this idea of the modern meadow. And the fact that we're seeing in our research that people are looking more and more for natural looking gardens, and an interest in native plants is helping to inform that. The interest in natural looking gardens is up 6% since last year. People are really wanting a bit of a carefree style like you see in the images on the screen. And how you can achieve that with plants is mixing some more compact grasses in with pollinator perennials. And you don't need to have a wide variety of these plants to achieve this look. In fact, if you look on the plan on the left here, you can see that just as in nature, we're proposing a design that masses some of these perennials like in a grouping and then, links that with a grouping of grasses. So you get, a swath of color, some grass, and you get that mixed feeling. I think as a design principle, it's better to have fewer varieties, but create these masses, even if you're trying to go for a natural look, because in nature, plants are usually grouped together similarly. Megan, take us through some of the choices for that are perfect for the modern meadow.
Yeah, so bubble bath allium, we love this one. The clusters, the flowers get so big. So that's sort of our favorite thing about it. I love the color. It's sort of this light lavender pink. And this is one, I have alliums in my yard. I had a barbecue and people were like, "What is this plant?" Because it was just covered in bees. So this is a great pollinator plant. The Sunseekers, echinaceas, these have so many petals. We have the white here, which I love that has the yellow center to add a little bit more color, a little pop, but we have this in 5 different colors right now. And the nice thing about these, sometimes we get the question, why is my echinacea so short? And it's because it was probably bred to be short. But the sunseekers get a little taller, so this is a great one for your modern meadow to make sure they're standing out with the grasses you've put in. The dark matter meadow sage, the color on this is just so vibrant and wonderful. Um, really long blooming. This is a great one. Stays low, so it's good for sort of the front part. And then switchgrasses are an awesome option. This is a native species of grass. They're great because they have this color changing. The heavy metal, when it comes out, it develops these red tips, and then you get these really light, airy panicles. This adds movement to your garden. It blows in the wind. And the nice thing about switchgrasses is they're really upright and they tend to stay narrow. So this is great for grouping in with your perennials because they're not gonna go spread out and kind of shade things out. So this is a great one. It stays well behaved at the party.
In fact, looking at these plants all together, I can visualize how this could look in that modern meadow. Like they have, the four that you selected all happen to go together. I love the way that, that bubble bath allium lavender is kind of a lighter, color tone, but similar to the dark matter. I think that's really nice. And I love the white echinacea, although I will say that Sunseekers, there's a pumpkin pie shade that I really, really love as well. So the next trend, and this is one that everybody, was gravitating to in our poll, bold colors or calm white and having lush layers of blooms. You can see in the design that we created at left that we're really using those bold pops of color kind of at the edges of the garden space and then using some evergreen to soften it a bit, but really letting those bold flowering shrubs really stand out. I think looking at what's emerging in hydrangeas and roses in terms of popularity, we can really see that bold color, blues and reds and magentas are really coming on strong. And then also seeing development on the perennial side, a lot of interest in orange, which used to be kind of a color that I don't know if that's going to work in my garden. A lot of people gravitating towards orange and purple perennials, and then using whites to kind of create a bridge between those bold colors and, the green of your garden. So really sort of helping to, I guess, complement the bold with white is another key thing that we're seeing in garden design.
Yeah, so gardenias, wonderful. That fabulous smell, and then just such beautiful, crisp white flowers. Um, you're gonna see, so we have these grafted and not grafted. If you're on the West Coast, you're only going to see them grafted. So the grafted ones, it has a different rootstock on it that is more resistant to nematodes. It tolerates poor soils, can take up nutrients a little better. So on the West Coast for your gardenias, grafted is great. That's all we have on the West Coast. In the Southeast, gardenias just thrive, so you're probably going to be okay with one that's not grafted, but you'll see both out there. But first love, those double flowers, kind of the swirly middle, just wonderful.
Mm.
The Jazzy Jewel hibiscus, again, that orange color. Orange is one of my favorite colors. Big blooms, and then a really nice, sort of more compact growth. So they're really good for containers. If you're someone in a place where they're not hardy, you can treat this like an annual. You can overwinter it inside. So don't be afraid to give them a try. This looks so great next to a pool, for that fun tropical
And they're
vibe.
really big. The blooms are just,
They're,
they're
yeah, they're
gorgeous.
huge.
Head trimming.
So much fun. Um, the Seaside Serenade series of hydrangeas, we love these. They're really sturdy stems, really thick leaves. Uh, we have lots of colors to check out. This is the Newport that we love for this trend of the vibrant blooms. Um, and this color is more acidic soils. If you want to see what it looks like a little more pink in your more alkaline soils, you can check out the plant page on monrovia.com. We have some examples of that in the photos. But not only are these reblooming, but the flowers last for so long that it's almost just continuous blooming. You can have blooms on this plant the whole time, and they age, we call it antiquing. They get kind of a cool look as the colors sort of fade. But if you don't like it, just deadhead them. There's plenty more blooms coming up. And then the Emerald Boxer Holly. This is a great boxwood replacement if you're struggling with your boxwoods. Maybe there's blight in your area. Um, Shears really well, has sort of that classic boxwood size. This is one you might have a hard time telling the difference between this and a boxwood from far away. You're like, which is it? So it's a really great option, and it's going to be that backdrop, that nice green lush backdrop for your bright colors and the whites. You want to have, a nice background for those.
And then if you are interested in more of that, just layers of green and that feeling of tranquility that comes from that idea, one of the things that we're seeing is a strong interest in kind of enveloping your outdoor space in green. So that's including vines going up a fence or, overhead, as you can see in the design down below to the left. And it's also thinking about, how are you layering ground cover to then build up to your medium-sized shrubs or some of your, taller shrubs, screening the back fence. So really it's creating living walls, that's become really popular in the last few years. And you can add a little bit of color to this look, or a white bloom or there, but you're trying to keep it very muted, very, very serene.
So we have the Green Tower boxwood, and this is a great one because I know sometimes people see this and they're like, I didn't even know a boxwood could get that tall. But not only does it get really tall, but it stays narrow. So it only gets about 2 feet, maybe 3. So if you have a smaller garden or a smaller planting bed, you want to mask that fence. This is a really great option. Star Jasmine, so just wonderful. This can climb, this can be a ground cover, that great scent. Have it, on a trellis over your patio. So you get to enjoy that scent. This is, you can completely enclose a space with this to make just that wonderful green space. If it's not hardy in your area, a lot of times you can find this in smaller pots, and it's great for containers. It'll spill over the edge, and you'll still get to enjoy that scent on your patio. The Tectonic series of begonias, go check out all of these. They're so cool. These are found by Dan Hinckley, just really unique varieties. The Magma has this sort of metallic, dark blue green foliage, and then you'll see sort of these hints of the underside, which is like a maroon, purple, red. Just such great contrast. It's great in containers. But it's that big foliage really, it's a nice place for the eye to rest. It gives you that sense of calm. And then also a bunch of really cool different ferns in the Jurassic series, also from Dan Hinckley. So this one's kind of a holly-like look, and I just love this color green, sort of this uh, dusty green. It's just so different. So to add those, you want those different contrasts of your different greens if you're sticking with that palette.
Yeah, we get asked often about, do's and don'ts in this idea of green drenching. And I think one of the do's is really mixing up different tones of green and also thinking about different, leaf sizes, having a few places. I like how you said the begonias allow your eye to rest a bit, because that larger leaf size. And I'm thinking of another plant that I just love that I often recommend for this style of garden, which is the Fascia camouflage, the one that we have that's variegated and just really eye-catching, makes a great statement plant. I love it in a container that you can move around to change where your eye is going in the setting. So green drenching, I'm a fan. But then I also have to admit, I really like this idea of romancing the edible garden a little bit. We're seeing, as people are drawn to these old-fashioned plants that are made new again, roses, hydrangeas, lilacs, they're thinking about how to combine them with their interest in edibles and mixing some of these plants with blueberries, let's say, or strawberries, herbs. That's really the romance of the edible garden we're talking about here. And you can see in the design below that that's a mix of it's using berries and lavender and other herbs like rosemary in with hydrangeas and just sort of tucking in flowers here and there in your edible space, or going the other way, tucking in edible perennials in a more traditional landscape is really the idea. So think about, you know, roses, for instance, planted with strawberries or with even, with apple trees, just sort of mixing that in. And I think some of our newer varieties of fruit trees that stay smaller, even the columnar shape, like the fruit snacks variety we have, just make a really beautiful um, tapestry in the garden with some of these flowering shrubs. So I call it a happy mix of color and productivity.
So Bountiful Blue blueberry is our most popular blueberry by far. This is, it's delicious. It produces a lot of berries. It's low chill, so if you live in a warmer climate, this is great for that. But it's also just beautiful. It's this nice rounded shrub. The foliage is gorgeous. Like this can be a hedge. You can have a whole hedge of, an edible hedge that you can go walk down and snack on because it's just so gorgeous. And the foliage you also get fall color. It's just this beautiful range depending on the weather of oranges and pinks and reds. Um, so yeah, having some of blueberries not only delicious but beautiful is so wonderful for combining these two looks. Phenomenal lavender. It's a more hardy lavender. It's more humidity tolerant, so that's great. And this is one of those lavenders that, has the long wands, so you can use this for your crafts, dry it, your sachets. It has that wonderful scent, so that's great if you like to interact a little more with your garden. The Eau de Parfum series of roses, these are great because a lot of shrub roses, they're so easy to care for. They've got that great form, but they haven't been available with a fragrance. So this is a new series. People have been working and breeding to try and get them more fragrant for a while. So a lot of fragrant roses. They're your hybrid tea roses. They're maybe kind of leggy, not as pretty. Um, these are disease resistant. They're a more compact form, and there's just some beautiful colors. The bling also goes with your bright color trend. It's so gorgeous. And then Nitty Gritty White Rose. Again, so easy, disease resistant, and this is your ground cover type roses. So this is, you know, gonna spread. You've got good and big mass plantings, also great in containers. And these bloom, the bloom time is really impressive on these. So this is definitely an improvement on how long your ground cover rose is going to bloom.
Mm. And I just want to underscore how great they look in containers. Really, really, they just sort of spill and have this wonderful cottage kind of vibe to it. Really lovely. Okay, so talking about containers, wanted to share a little bit of ideas of how to bring some of these trends into a container idea. So we'll start with green drenching. I think a wonderful plant to use in the green drenching style are ferns, and there's so many different ferns that we grow, so many different shapes and textures of the leaves. This container actually uses ostrich fern. That's going to be the focal point. And then we matched it with Burgundy Glow Ajuga, which you can see on the lower left. It has beautiful foliage that picks up this burgundy color that then we echo in the siren song Heuchera. And putting those together in a container that can be in a part shade or shade environment. As I said, mixing these sort of muted colors with the green is still part of the green drenching idea, and it really creates an eye-catching container, a pop of interest in a shady area. So that's our green drenching container idea. And then thinking about the modern meadow, another key trend that we've been following is just how interested people are in attracting hummingbirds, really wanting pollinators to come to their gardens, but especially hummingbirds. So this planting we designed with hummingbirds in mind, and it uses as its focal point a plant called Cestrum orange peel. And this plant, lovely scent, at the end of the day, really, really sweet. And a great hummingbird attractor because of its tubular flowers. And then we paired that with Marianne lantana. That's a lantana that we've been growing for a very long time. And I love it. It's this beautiful pink, yellow, just I think of it as like a little baby lantana. It's just got such sweet colors. It's a great plant if you're thinking too of doing something for Easter. That's a really wonderful plant to have in your Easter decor. And then we paired that lantana, which just has this nice sprawling habit, also with a white lavender. That's Javelin Forte lavender you see on the white lavender on the left. And then we tucked a little gazania that you can't see so much in the center, but as you can tell, that container has this nice sort of free, a little bit wild feeling to it. But I think the colors keep it more focused, so it gives it some, um, maybe higher design appeal, keeping the color palette kind of consistent. And then the last container is just an idea of how to weave, flowers in with edibles. So this is a berry container, basically. It's you have a raspberry or a blackberry. We have a fantastic thornless blackberry called Superlicious that you could put there in the center. And then you could plant some lovely seascape strawberries around it. But if you wanted to add a little bit of, something extra, a little surprise, I love Sunbelievable for doing that. Sunbelievable is the sunflower that just won't quit. It starts blooming in spring and it blooms all the way, to first frost. And it's a flowering machine. So it would look fantastic in a container with the strawberries and a blackberry or raspberry to complement it. And we put it in this, wine barrel type planter to give the berries lots of room. But I think even if you don't have a small space, you can actually have quite a lovely edible garden and a feeling of, as we said, romancing the edible garden in that space. So there's a few container ideas to think about for the spring. But let's talk about questions that we get most often, and that Megan, as Kathleen said at the beginning, Megan is our go-to for answering a lot of these questions we get. One of the big ones we get is, I need something deer resistant. Depending on where you live, deer seem to be eating everything, and people are just writing in saying, I'm tired of my, wonderful garden just being the buffet, for the deer. So what can I plant that, deer will, hopefully resist? Megan, you want to go over your top choices here?
Yeah, so the caveats, the deer story. So deer will eat almost anything if they're hungry enough. If they're running out of things out there to eat, they'll try it. If you're starving, what can you do? Also, something to keep in mind too is you don't know if you don't like it until you taste it. So true for kids, true for deer. So if you have a lot, even just those, do I like this? You might see that, and that'll usually stop. But if you see that damage, that could be why. So real quick, I'll go over the reasons why deer don't like certain plants, and then I can give these examples. So one is a strong scent, sort of herbal things. Um, Another is texture, like fuzzy foliage, they're not really a fan of. Also thorns they have, obviously people are like, they eat my roses. It's like, but the thorns are on the stem, they can avoid them. Um, Things like barberries, the tiny little leaves are tucked in there with very sharp thorns. That's probably the most deer resistant plant. Some parts of the country, it is considered invasive. You're not going to be able to find it. We're not allowed to ship them there. But in lots of parts of the country, totally fine, not invasive at all. So that's a great option for those places. Just make sure you look that up. Some plants there's compounds in there that are toxic or irritating, basically give them a rumbly tummy. So they'll try it and later be like, that wasn't great. And then another one is really fine textured. It's not their preference just because they have to eat so much of it for it to be worth it. So it's like, I'm going to go something a little juicier. So some good options for these. And then also, if you can combine multiples of these, those are going to be even more tolerant. So rosemary, great for us. We love it with chicken, but they don't like it. Too strong, not a fan. It's pretty woody. So that's a really great one. I love having rosemary in my garden. Low water needs, takes heat, loves heat. Um, Picture perfect Nepeta, also called catmint. So it's in the mint family. So it's got that flavor, that scent they don't really like. It also has a little bit of fuzzy leaves too. So you've got that, combining a couple different ones that makes it a little better. And this is just so great in your garden for pollinators, that modern meadow look. It's perfect for that. Uh, Potentillas, the ginger snap is so cute. It's this more unique color rather than, a lot of potentillas are just your basic yellow. It has, these lovely little peachy tones in there. Really nice compact habit, doesn't get leggy, and they're not a fan of potentillas. These are a really good option. A combination of flavors they don't like, and also the small foliage, and it's woody. So try and get that, little foliage that doesn't taste good out of woody stems. Uh, and then one that was a little surprising for me, bleeding hearts. So that has a compound in there that makes them feel icky. So that's why they don't like it. Also has that fine foliage that makes it not really worth it. The Amore is so cool. I mean, obviously, I love all bleeding hearts, and you'll see the ones they have those long stems and they're hanging down, beautiful. But the Amore is something I'd never seen before, where they're in clusters. So it's a really different look. It's a nice compact form, and again, you're that white for balancing your bright colors. It's great for that one. Great in containers because it's smaller, so your shade containers. So that one's just really darling.
You had
Uh,
mentioned too, Megan, that a source that you tend to go to a lot for deer resistance.
yeah, so a couple places to look at. First, we do have a deer resistant filter on our plant finder.
Hmm.
But that again is sort of, you're just like yes or no. So there might be some things in the gray area, but it's a really good place to start. I love the Rutgers University has a deer resistant database. And this is them actually testing things. Like they're doing scientific research to find out what plants deers don't like. And they rate them on an A to D.
Mhm.
So almost never damaged all the way up to often severely damaged. So that's good to see if you know you have really hungry deer in your area, maybe go for the A's. It is, they're based in New Jersey, so they're like zone 6, 7 there. So your zone 8 stuff, not everything's on there. But
Mhm.
that is absolutely my favorite resource. You can sort it, you can search by common name. So just Google Rutgers deer resistant and you'll find it pretty easily.
That's a great tip. Thank you.
And then your local garden center,
Mhm.
they're dealing with this. This is an entire community of people that have been giving feedback on what the deer have been eating or not. Something interesting about deer is they can be regional. They
Mhm.
have, in different parts of the country, they actually have different tastes, which is
Sure.
kind of cool, different trends, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, so your local garden center is going to know those little different things about the deer in your area. So that's a great place to check out.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, next question we get a lot of is I need something water-wise. It's happening in more areas of the country, going through periods of drought or limited water, use. And we've got a lot of plants that can serve that need.
Yeah, so there's different ranges of you have your succulents, cactuses. Those are pretty obvious. But there's other great things as well. The mega pizzazz, these are great. They're zone 10, but most places you're going to treat them as an annual, and they're fabulous in containers, either hanging baskets or down on the ground. They kind of spill over the edges. I love this for full sun hanging baskets because in my particular situation, my baskets are the most annoying thing to water. So it's great if you can water it less. Really lovely, vibrant colors on these. We have 3 different colors, so check those out. Um, Verbena de la Mina. Uh, this is a really cool one. So this was selected, so it was found in nature.
Mhm.
It was selected from on the Cedros Island off of the California coast, so it's a California native. It's really fast growing. Pollinators love it. It keeps blooming for a long time, and this is sort of a taller, really has that meadowy, natural look.
Yes,
So
yeah.
this
This would
is
be great in the modern
perfect for
meadow.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it really, I have one actually in my front yard, and it just catches the wind really beautifully, and yeah, it feels
Mhm.
very delicate.
Yeah, nice fine texture. Yeah, really beautiful. Hesperaloes, we love the stoplights. It's a smaller size, really bright flowers. Hummingbirds love this one. Hesperaloes species are native to Texas area. So, they're drought tolerant, love heat, a little more hardy than some of your other more succulent cactusy kind of things. And then Miner's Mallow Spurge or Euphorbia. This is a perennial. It's so gorgeous and it loves sun. It has low water needs. It has this great foliage, and then the flowers are so cool when those come out. They're sort of green and yellow, but the stems are still red, and it looks so great. And this is another really deer resistant one because there's things in it that are toxic and they don't like. So great option for that as well.
Yeah, I love it gets the flowers are like chartreuse kind of yellow. I
Hmm.
really,
Hmm.
so I think that the big thing about choosing Waterwise is you have so many choices. I mean, it's unlimited. We've got a lot of great new Delosperma too that we introduced this year that I think of as another option for Waterwise. But you have a lot of color choices in Waterwise more than ever. Okay. Another key question we get is I need to plant something that can, cover this fence or screen out the neighbor. I want something that, I want to block this view that I don't want. So you've got some great new choices here.
Yeah, so we love the tight squeeze Western red cedar, so it's a thuya. It's bigger, it's a little more loose than your arborvitaes. But this one's so nice and contained and compact, and you're gonna get that great screening, but it also is a slower grower than sometimes we compare it to Green Giant, which is a really popular one people want to use for screening. It gets huge, it gets big fast, and this one just has been so lovely. We have a customer that's been showing us how it's been growing in their garden over the years, and I don't think they even shear it, and they're just these perfect triangles, and they're just growing at such a lovely rate and this great screen. So um, we actually renamed this one because we didn't feel like we were calling it Green Sport because it was a sport of another plant, but it was like, this is not conveying how great this plant is. So we're hoping tight squeeze is a great option for something that stays more compact. So I have the Emerald Colonnade and the Green Tower again, because these are kind of interchangeable depending on where you live and which one's best for you.
Mm.
So the Emerald Colonnade Holly is great for warmer areas, humid areas, if you need a boxwood alternative. But then if you need something a little hardier, you got the Green Tower boxwood, and these both are going to give you your nice upright, dense foliage, great for screening.
Yeah, really full and lustrous
Mhm.
looking, kind of glossy. Yeah, they're both great choices.
And the Emerald Colonnade we do in a lot of fun topiary forms too. So, um, and then I think, we think hedges, evergreen hedges, boxwoods, hollies, but don't forget about flowers. There's great flowering shrubs that are great screening. Camellias are awesome. They've got that glossy foliage, so they're helping you out while you're around. And then they've got those early season blooms. Swan Lake, just gorgeous, but so many colors, reds, pinks, just, yeah, beautiful. Your nice big showy flowers at a time when a lot of other things aren't blooming.
It's a really good point that when a lot of things aren't blooming, camellias really provide that. And then I also think I just love camellias for their beautiful lustrous foliage. I mean, having a whole bank of them covering something is great, all year round. So let's tackle a few other popular questions that we get. So one is, we hear a lot, about sort of what we call pushing the zone. And, the USDA recently redid the zone maps, and a lot of people got very excited that suddenly, oh, I have an opportunity to grow something I might not have. Although we've been cautioning people, don't go overboard on the, if you're suddenly, if you went from a 6 to, into a 7, well, you might want to tread carefully. But let's talk about this. When is it possible to push the zone? And the first thing I would say is I'm in a zone 10, and in Northern California. And if something is, a zone 9, it's probably going to do really well in my garden. I'm going to easily try for that. Zone 8, sometimes they just don't thrive as much as they might in a zone 8. In a zone 10, again, depending on where I plant it. I love Dan Hinckley plants, for instance, but some of them, they're not meant to be a zone 10. So I have to think about them differently in the garden and use them differently. They're not going to get to that full size or fullness, but they're still lovely kind of statement specimen plants to me. So I tuck them in different places. So those are the ways that, being in a higher zone, I sometimes look to those plants that are really, maybe it's supposed to max out at zone 8, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. I think it's a little easier to do than some of the other things like trying to grow something in a zone 6 environment that, might be really a zone 7 or 8 plant. But Megan, what do you think? pushing the zone.
Yeah, there are things when you're in a warmer zone to consider. There are some flowering plants that need chill hours in order to flower. Um, Herbaceous peonies are an example of that. If you're in a zone 10, you probably want to get an Ito peony because it doesn't need the chill. Again, this is something your local garden centers, I mean, they're probably not going to bring in things that are going to flower in your zone.
Yeah.
Some lilacs do much better in colder areas. We have some lilacs that we'll say in the description is better for warmer zones. So there are some things that, aren't going to flower in your zone. It's not a huge amount, but and then with the colder zones, there's different protections, things that you can do. You can cover things. There might be some things that you treat a little differently. I know in um, Minnesota, they cut uh, hydrangeas down to the ground, which I think a lot of people, or they can, and you need the reblooming ones. So sometimes you cut your big leaf hydrangeas down to the ground. So there's just some different things to consider. I know that zone 4, they got skills. They've got stuff going on. um, but I do like to, caution people, make sure it's something you really love and you're attached to and you're willing to baby it a little bit. And I think tuck it near a house. A lot of times it's the cold wind too, besides that's damaging things, not necessarily the roots. Some things are root hardy, some things aren't. There's different reasons why it might have that zone on it, but trying to push the zone on a whole hedge, like I feel like that's just a
That's a
recipe
little
for
too risky.
disaster. Like a bad year, you lost your whole hedge. So
Yeah.
yeah, stick
Yeah.
to specimens that you really love.
Yeah.
Find a protected area, and then you might have to think about, frost cloth or covering things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is a big category. How can we tell what's wrong with a plant? So we often have people writing into us, asking us to diagnose things. But what are some basic considerations or some common problems, I guess, that we see fairly often and just kind of we can share a few things for people to keep in mind.
Mhm. So first, I think the first step is knowing if there really is a problem. If you're seeing some light spotting, a little bit of insect damage, there's an ecosystem in your garden.
Right.
The bugs were there first. So, let them have a little bit of a snack, but it can, with certain things, get out of hand. So, knowing that kind of where the threshold is, it's like, okay, this is starting to be a problem if they're getting the new growth and it is, sorry, I do that to fix the focus when it goes
Okay.
off. That's when you need to start worrying about it, but not everything is the end of the world. If you had a really hot summer and maybe a deciduous shrub, the leaves got a little scorched on the tips, it's going to drop those leaves.
Uh-huh.
If it had a lot of the year to, if it completely defoliated, that's probably a problem. But if a little scorching, maybe on your Japanese maple at the edges, it's
Mhm.
going to drop the leaves. It'll probably be
Feel
okay.
fine. Yeah. Yeah.
I know the biggest problem people have getting a plant established is really watering is so important.
Mhm.
And if your plant just kicks it, if you aren't pretty sure it was like a really harsh winter or something like that, um, I was probably water. And
Uh-huh.
definitely run into it with conifers. Different plants tell you their problems in different ways. Some wilt, some burn. Conifers just silently suffer, I feel like. If you like no sign, they're suffering. You don't see the signs until like a long time later. So
Mhm.
that happens a lot, that it was probably not watering enough and you didn't notice until it was really having a hard time. And then there's things to consider, is like, where's the damage? If your whole plant is yellowing, that's probably something to do with the roots, the nutrition, water, the whole thing's wilting. That could be overwatering or underwatering, so make sure you put your, I always say fingers in the soil. I don't trust the probes. So
Uh,
the digits are your best tool, and they're free. Um,
yeah, and actually
and
our plant care, we say, water when the top 3 inches are dry, or water when the first, the top inch is dry. So knowing what that plant needs, and like you said, just, dip your finger in the soil, get a sense
Mhm.
of how dry it is. I think the other thing that you said, which sounds so simple, but good to keep in mind, is it the whole plant or is it part of the plant? Because if something's happening and you can see it on every leaf, well, that's probably what we call a significant problem. But if there's something that's just kind of a part of it, it's probably not going to be that big a deal and it'll sort of correct itself.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, obviously it depends on the plant.
Mhm.
There's so many things.
Yeah.
Um, and then, the time of year, the weather you've had. If leaves are browning, crisping, that means water wasn't getting to those cells, right? So if it's been really hot,
Uh,
that's probably why. But it also can happen in the winter. Frozen ground, the wind is desiccating the leaves, you can get browning then. So, when it happens matters.
mhm.
If it's only happening on one side of the plant over winter, that was probably wind. If it's
Mhm.
only happening on one side of the plant during summer, it might be your irrigation isn't getting to both sides of the plant. So that's
Mhm.
something to check
Mhm.
for.
Yeah, I think watering and really getting on some regular routine with a plant is important. Then also being mindful of what's the weather doing, and if you're if you're getting less rain than usual, increasing the water that you're doing, or more rain, just modifying, but trying to keep it regular. I think that the plants that have suffered in my own garden the most have been because of challenges in watering. Honestly, I didn't get them off to the right start, or I didn't continue watering them in a sort of more regular way. That's what they're needing. And I think the other thing, when you do have a problem, we say go into your local garden center to get advice. I think they're a great source. But make sure before you go, just take a picture of the whole plant with you. I think a lot of times people bring a leaf in and they want somebody to diagnose this problem for them, but really they need to see, is this like over the whole plant that this is happening, or is it just, one leaf? So the more information you can bring with you, the more helpful that's going to be to the garden center resource that can help you. So I think the other question I had is we often get like, is this dead or not? What are some ways that you would say, here's how to tell if a plant is truly dead, or maybe it just, got injured, but it'll be fine.
So one way is to check and see, like, is this branch really dead? You can scrape away a little bit of the bark and see if it's green
Mhm.
underneath. This is Some things leaf out really late, so people are like, is this dead? Like they panic.
Yeah.
So just, little spot, just a little scrape away, you can see on, the part that you're worried about. Um, so yeah, keep in mind some things do leaf out late,
Yeah.
especially depending on your climate. So yeah, sometimes it's giving it time. Um, Sometimes you have to sort of weigh, well, some of it's okay, but a lot of it's damaged, and it's like, okay, it could struggle through, but is it really going to thrive again? If you once you cut out the dead.
Are reluctant to do
Yeah.
that, but I totally agree with you. It could be the plant may make it, but it may not ever really be the same.
Yeah.
So you might just want to get a new one.
Yeah.
That's okay too. Okay, this plant grew taller than I thought it would. We do hear that. And
Mhm.
tell us how we know, or how we come to determine, if we say something's going to reach, 10 feet tall, or, where are we getting that information? How accurate is it? And also, why would something get taller?
Yeah, so this is one of the hardest parts when I write up plant information, is making sure I am being
Yeah.
accurate with this. And it can be really hard, honestly. And then sometimes, something keeps growing for 20 years, well, it turns out it gets a lot bigger. Um, but, eh, and then also things grow differently in different climates in different parts of the country, and we sell to the whole country. So we try our best to try and, you know, I try to say a range if there's a big range, things like that.
Mhm.
But I had my plant ID professor in school said what his professor said, which is plants don't read books. Now I say plants don't read the tag, they don't read the website, they don't care what you say. Um, but the big thing is plants growth is determined by their environment. So it can, the amount of sun is a huge one. Higher altitudes, things grow shorter.
Yeah.
Different weather, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and evergreens get huge here. It's, mild weather, lots of rain. So there's different things to keep in mind with that. But a huge one that we see a lot when things are getting too tall is they're in more shade. So when their plants are in more shade than they like, they're going to start to grow to like look for the sun.
Yeah.
So if you have overcrowding, you have a tree in a space that's already lots of trees, it's going to start to really reach. So
Mm.
yeah, anything that's maybe wants a little more sun, um, it's gonna stretch. And that's something that doesn't mean, you know, you can still put it in more shade if it's gonna be okay, but it's just, keep in mind that it's gonna affect how it
Sure.
looks.
How it grows. And then last question, peonies. We get asked a lot about our peonies. And one of the questions is what makes them so prized, so expensive, and then, how to care for them. So let's just start with the cost of a peony. It's one of the most significant investments you can make in your spring garden, for those beautiful blooms. But tell us what's the value behind the price?
Mhm. So you'll see a range of prices and sizes. As far as ours go, peonies take a few years to flower.
Hmm.
So when you're buying, you'll find them, bare root or in a little container. It might be a couple years before it's going to flower. You're not going to get flowers that first year. Our peonies are going to flower that first year. They're flowering in our nursery. They're flowering in the garden center.
Because we're keeping them
Um,
here before we ship them.
yes.
Yeah.
So because they've been on our nursery, we've been growing them those couple years that it takes.
Yeah.
That was on our time instead of
Yeah.
your time.
Right. Right.
Um, so it's more expensive if you have to
Yeah.
hold a plant for that long. Um, but so how patient do you want to be? I think it's worth it to get that nice full one, and you can see in the garden center what you're getting. Um, so yeah, that's the thing behind that. It's the time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. That's taking a lot of time before it got to you. And then when should you cut them? Like if you're growing them to enjoy them, indoors, like when is a good time to cut them?
Yeah, I think I cut like every single one of mine. I like to make flower arrangements, so I grow it to cut.
Uh-huh.
So the perfect time they call it the marshmallow phase. So I think that's a really good way to think about it, because you want to cut them before they fully open.
Yeah.
Um, so feels like a marshmallow. I think that's
Uh-huh.
pretty
Great.
good way to know. Something people ask a lot too is there's ants on them.
Yeah.
Totally fine. There's these little nectaries. They're delicious. The ants are
Uh-huh.
going after that sugar.
Okay.
Um, doesn't affect the flower at all. For cut flowers, it can be a little annoying because you're bringing it in your house. So that's the nice thing about doing that marshmallows phase 2 is you can kind of
Yeah.
shake them off and it's not going to damage the flower.
Uh-huh.
If you're waiting until it's fully open, they're probably like in the flower.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing too about getting them when they're in bud, and then they're gonna, last longer.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Um, if you liked some of the designs that you saw us discuss earlier, I just wanted to highlight, you can find them in our best landscape plans, completely detailed with all the plants that you need. You can find those, just go to our website under Be Inspired. This will pop down, you'll see landscape plans and you can click view all, and then it's right here. So that's how you can find that. And I think we have just a few more minutes if there are some questions, Kathleen, that you heard from the audience that you might want to
Sure, absolutely. We do have a few questions. First one I have, and I'm hopefully we're not playing stump the hosts today, but the switchgrass that you mentioned, Megan, there were a few questions about um, shedding of the plumes, and do we know if that one is known for shedding at all?
I have some in my yard, and they chill and they don't make a mess. And then I keep them for winter interest, and they just stay perfectly behaved. I don't have any sort of mess around them. And then I cut them down sort of very early spring, late winter.
Great.
Um,
Perfect. That is a great question. We also had a few questions about roses in containers, a few, I think, surprises with people wanting to maybe try that. Can you guys both share a little bit about, what good selections might be for putting roses in containers?
Sure. I think, a lot of our the roses that we choose to grow stay naturally they're more compact. We talked about nitty gritty, which is a great ground cover type. I love the Seaside Swirl Rugosa roses. I think that makes a really good container rose. It's a more well-behaved rugosa, comes in beautiful colors. I'm crazy about that one. And then we also grow a really darling miniature peach rose called Itsy Bitsy. That only gets like 2 feet tall. And it gets covered with blooms, and the blooms are different shades of sort of, I think of it as a sunset rose, different shades of orange, apricot and kind of blush, and you get these different colors on the plant at once, and that looks really, really pretty. So those are two of my favorites. Megan?
Yeah, and if you have something a little bigger, we've got the Grace and Grit,
Mhm.
which they have just this nice, really dense, rounded form. So those are, they get a little bigger. They don't spill like your nitty gritties, but it's a really just a nice, compact. The foliage on them is gorgeous. It's so dense. So those are great ones too.
Mhm.
I have both of those, both nitty gritty and Grace and Grit in containers here in the north, so they do well there as well. So I think that was it. We had some great questions and great comments about, zone pushing, and thank you for that information, and just all sorts of really some really specific questions. So Katie, as I toss it back to you, if you can kind of tell people how they can really get specific answers to those types of questions.
Sure. So we have a tool, and Megan mentioned it briefly, called My Plant Finder. On our site, you could see it right here. Go to monrovia.com, click on My Plant Finder, enter your zip code, and that will determine your zone for us. And then you can select on here, you can choose the plant type you're looking for. You can filter, obviously, for sun or water needs, and fill out many more things that you desire, and then it searches our plant database. Once you put in what you're looking for, it'll bring up all the plants that will fit that criteria for you. And then if you click on one of these and you're interested, you can find out if it has shipped near you, or you might need to order it from your local garden center.
Such great information. Well, I think that's all the time that we have for today. Just one last reminder that you will be receiving a link to today's presentation, and that link will also include a list of all the plants that were talked about today. So thank you to Katie and Megan. Katie, I'll give you the last word there.
All right, well, happy spring, everyone. Enjoy gardening.